Hey guys, Ezra here and welcome back to another movie review. And on today's review, I want to talk about Final Destination Bloodlines. This is the sixth installment of the Final Destination franchise. It's been a long time since we see a Final Destination movie. Last time was the fifth one in 2011, which is the first Final Destination movie that I watched with my mom, on Blu-ray. And I remember watching that, and then I kind of like cover my eyes, just like really cringing at like the gore, but I feel like looking back at it, like some of them are comical in a way, and it was actually kind of impressive to see the behind the scenes practical stuff, and when they announced a next Final Destination movie, I was like fine by it. It's not exactly I'm not exactly the biggest fan of like the Final Destination franchise, but I get it why this franchise has its own audience, and it has a huge following in a way. So I think at the end of the day, I decided to check it out anyway, because I like the series. I'm not a big fan of it, but I do appreciate the series, because it is kind of fun to see how people getting killed in a creative way, so that's what I was expecting going into this movie, and this movie does deliver on that, so I think I would say this movie is a comeback, like it's like a good comeback to the Final Destination franchise, and then if this movie was successful, then I imagine there's gonna be more in the futures, but I do think that after such a long time, I think people will have like a huge nostalgia to the franchise itself, and I think this movie is the best movie review for the Final Destination movies, which I think that was quite wild, because I don't think this is like the best Final Destination movie. It is not. I still think the first two movies is like the best one, at least for me. I like the atmosphere and the characters more in this in the first two movies, and obviously counters are not exactly the strongest suit for the Final Destination movies, but I do think this movie actually has some good counters, kind of like how the first two movie has some good counters, even though there is some a bit inconsistencies with the counters itself, but when they do get together and try to avoid that, it's actually become really really fun, and same thing goes with this movie. There is some counters that seems like an asshole at first, but eventually the counter develop and becomes likable, in the in the later part about the movies, which I quite like that, and the death itself, I feel that is I would say the death is pretty creative, but I feel like there is also too many CGI in these movies. I kind of wish there is a bit more practical effects in the movies, and there's probably some practical effects, because Final Destination are known for using practical stunts, especially from behind the scenes stuff, so I imagine that from the behind the scenes of this movie, there is probably some practical effects as well, but I feel like when you are watching the movie, they look CGI, to be honest, and I feel like I was kind of like, okay, fine. I mean, it is gross, it is grotesque, and it was played for a laugh in a way, but I kind of wish that the series kind of gone back to being a bit more serious, and try to treat the death as a bit more gruesome, and grueling to watch, and making you grinding your teeth, where you're just like waiting to see somebody get killed, and I feel like this will be, I feel like because I was Final Destination 5 with my mom, when I was like fifth grade, and I was like covering my eyes and cringing about it, and I feel like I have this subconscious feeling where I'm watching Bloodlines in theaters, and then I kind of like covers my eyes, it's kind of like waiting for something bad to happen, but when something bad did happen, I was like, okay, well, it was CGI, like I said before, so I feel like it kind of like loses the impact of it. Again, the kill itself still looks pretty cool, but I kind of wish it's a bit more practical effects, or practical feels on it, but either way, I would say the best part about this movie is actually the opening sequence, where it took place in 1968. You're following a young character named Iris, played by Brooke Basinger, I think, which I think she does a phenomenal job, and I really want to see her in more horror movies, maybe in the future, maybe like a slasher movie. Why not? She has like the final girl look to her, at least for me. But yeah, I think Brooke Basinger does a great job as playing the young Iris Campbell, and the opening sequence in this movie, in which is took place in the Skyview restaurant tower back in 1968, is absolutely amazing. And I almost kind of wish that the entire movie took place in 1968, to be honest, because I like the setting, I like what happens in that restaurant, and I think it's a cool set pieces, and I kind of wish there is a bit more to that. But I feel like we spend a lot of time in the opening sequence in that place, so I think that's why I think that's like the best part about the movies, is like the most interesting that's maybe not that scenes, but at least like set pieces for the characters itself, I kind of wish there's a bit more of that instead of just like in the opening sequence, and I feel like that's how good it was, and it's one of the moments in the movie that I actually really remember, because I think the rest of the movies after I finish watching it, they kind of like blend in together, to be honest, it's not exactly a bad thing, it's not like I'm getting bored by the movie, but the movie does takes its time, before it gets to the next kill, but again, once it's got going, I think it's absolutely fantastic, and but I don't think it beats the opening sequence, because I just love the 60s like aesthetic, I guess, in a way, and it's absolutely amazing, but yeah, that's the best part about the movie, to be honest, well, there is the other best part about the movies is obviously the William Bloodworth scenes, played by the late Tony Todd, and of course, speaking of Tony Todd, and I kind of want to like rant a little bit, so I want to compare how, like, like two of the biggest franchises that was known for Tony Todd handles Tony Todd's character. I want to compare Candyman, specifically the Candyman from 2021 with Final Destination Bloodlines, because starting with Candyman 2021, I did not like the movie. I really hate the movie, because they hired Tony Todd to be in the movie, but it was just a cameo in the end, where he just said, tell everyone. It's like, okay, well, like, why are you hiring Tony Todd to be a cameo in a Candyman movie? Like, the Candyman movie was popular because it was well made. Sure, he has a great performance, he has a great storyline, but most importantly, it's because of Tony Todd. Tony Todd is the Candyman. And for some reason, the fourth Candyman movie in 2021 didn't even bother to feature Tony Todd fully as Candyman. They do bring him back, but just as a cameo in the end, which I think, I don't know, man. I feel like looking back at it now, I kind of feels a bit more. I feel like that movie kind of like disrespect Tony Todd's legacy as a Candyman, because like in that movie, Candyman is a hive mind, right? But I feel like I don't understand why they didn't bring back Tony Todd to the whole movie, because I feel like you could still do a Candyman hive storyline with Tony Todd as the main Candyman, commanding the other Candyman, and probably having his Candyman to be the only one talking to the main characters, because I think Candyman 2021 is a spiritual sequel to the 1992 version, the original Candyman, and I feel like he has the right ingredient in the stove, but I feel like it wasn't cooked well enough, because I feel like the movie kind of stumbled a bit about the idea, and most importantly, I feel like they don't use Tony Todd, and I don't understand why, because now we lost Tony Todd, so obviously we're never gonna see him reprising his role fully as Candyman. All we get in the recent memory is just a cameo in the end of Candyman 2021. And trust me, man, a cameo is kind of disrespectful in my opinion, and that is not enough to respect Tony Todd's work as the Candyman. And that upset me a lot, especially how Tony Todd already passed away way back in 2024, so like the last time we see him as Candyman, it's just a cameo, which really fucking sucks, because I feel like you could have Candyman 2021 where Tony Todd actually fully reprising his role as Candyman, and then we got this scene in Final Destination Bloodlines where we see William Bloodworth's character one final time, which bring me to this movie. I think this movie treated William Bloodworth's character, Tony Todd's character, way better than Candyman 2021, which I think is a really terrible decision in that movie. But in this movie, there's actually a touching behind the scenes storyline with the filmmaker, because I think the directors, Zach and Adam, I think the two of them said to Tony Todd that I think at the time of filming, Tony Todd was incredibly ill, he was super sick, and I think he has a stomach cancer. I think that's the cause of death for Tony Todd, and as you can see in the movie, he was clearly ill, and I think at the time people know that this might be the last big movie that Tony Todd will do, because again he's very sick, so in the scene itself, the filmmaker, the director actually said to Mr. Todd that, hey Tony, we could just like scrap a couple of lines from the script and then allow Tony Todd himself to deliver the dialogue, that was basically the final message, for the fans, the people that has been supporting him throughout his entire life, and as you watch this movie, it's very clear that Tony Todd at the end there is speaking directly to the fans or to the audience that has been supporting him for his entire life. And it was a very touching dialogue, it's a very touching scene, and I nearly tear up, because like this is the last time we see, truly the last time we see Mr. Tony Todd, and he clearly, that dialogue is clearly directed towards the audience, and it was very, very touching. I really, really love how the dialogue fits for like the fans, but it also fits for the context of the Final Destination movie. It also fits for William Bloodworth's characters, because finally in this movie you learn the origin of William Bloodworth and how he became who he was, basically the personification of death, right, in a way, and why he became this way. And I think it does make sense, and I really, really like that. And yes, it's a touching final scene for Mr. Tony Todd, and I'm gonna miss him dearly, man, because Tony Todd is incredibly talented actors, and obviously well known for Final Destination and Candyman, and again, I really wish that Candyman 2021 can feature Tony Todd fully as the Candyman instead of just like a cameo. And looking back to it in this movie, I really, really angry. It makes me really, really angry at the 2021 version, in my opinion. But either way, I think this movie does handle William Bloodworth's character really, really well done, compared to Candyman 2021. But yeah, that's the reason why I watched Final Destination Bloodlines, obviously not only to see the latest entry to Final Destination, but also to see Tony Todd for one final time. And it is heartbreaking, when we lost such a talented actor, and yeah, again, if you're a big fan of Tony Todd, then yeah, please go see this movie. Obviously, this will be the final time you see him in the big screen. And again, Tony Todd himself has a final message for all of us, and again, the message is also fit for the Final Destination franchise, especially talking about death itself, so it's really hard. It's really bittersweet to see him for one final time, So yeah, at the end of the day, guys, Final Destination Bloodlines is a fun entry to the franchise, I kind of wish that this movie was a bit more serious with the deaths, but again, they're going to the direction where the death was treated as laugh and fun, and there's a lot of CGI involved with the deaths, which is kind of disappointing, but also kind of fun, to be honest, to watch. The opening sequence are the best part about this movie, in my opinion. I like the character more in the opening sequence, to be honest with you guys, compared to the modern one. But again, the present characters itself are not bad, but I do think the opening characters are a bit better, in my opinion. So I like the relationship between the two of them way better than the rest of the family, to be honest. I think the family relationship are good, I think at the end of the day, I'm still rooting for them to survive in the end, but I feel like they're not the best characters, let's just be honest here. But they do a good job with the characters, and I think people will get behind it, and try to root for certain character to beat that, So I think at the end of the day, the movie does a solid job, and I think this is a good return, a good comeback from that, essentially, So I think I enjoy this movie, and I think Final Destination fan will definitely enjoy this movie as well. And of course, seeing Tony Todd for the final time is bittersweet, So yeah, either way, guys, that's my review for Final Destination Bloodlines, So here's my question to you guys, what do you guys think about Final Destination Bloodlines, Do you guys think this is the best Final Destination movies, And what is your favorite Final Destination movie, And then, of course, what do you guys think about how Candyman 2021 handles Tony Todd, Because again, like I mentioned before, I really hate that movie, man, because I feel like they didn't really use Tony Todd, and looking back at it now, is really heart-wrenching that I think we don't get to see Tony Todd to reprise his role fully as the Candyman, because again, he does make a cameo in that movie, but a cameo is a bit disrespectful, in my opinion. I know that the filmmaker is not disrespectful to Tony Todd, but I just don't understand their decision for not bringing him fully to reprise his character throughout the entire movie as Candyman instead of just like a cameo, you know. So that really upset me, you know, because we don't get to see Tony Todd as Candyman again on the big screen, you know, in my opinion. But either way, yeah. Either way, let me know your opinions about that in the comment section below. Do you guys agree that there was like a huge fumble for the movie, or do you guys actually fine by it, you know? So I don't know. And if you guys enjoyed this video, then make sure you guys, you know, kill that subscribe and like button, guys, you know, share the videos, usual stuff, you know. Stay tuned for the I would say Mission Impossible movies, you know, in next week, you know, because Final Reckoning is releasing next week, you know. So stay tuned for that, guys. And again, I hope you guys enjoyed this movie review, and I will see you guys in the next one then. Bye.